Of the generation that journalist Tom Brokaw would retroactively celebrate in the 1990s as the greatest generation. From the glory of winning a world war and the passage of civil rights legislation to the dishonor of undeclared wars of choice and the perpetuation of Jim Crow, Shula stood shoulder to shoulder with men both famous and infamous. On the one hand, a president who inspired a nation into space, and on the other, a demagogic senator shrieking about a red menace, a Southern governor who stood in the door of a university to stop black students from entering, and a president who lurched from landslide victor to unindicted co-conspirator. Shula has outlived them all, and has lived long enough to see the election of the very man he distrusted and foresaw as a destructive force in 1983. In fact, men like Shula make it easier to cope with men like George Wallace, Richard Nixon, and Donald Trump. Not incidental to his strengths as a coach, he was a first-generation American, like Vince Lombardi, the son of immigrants who, in their day, were reviled and scapegoated every bit as much as latter-day bigots have done to people of color. It was the qualities handed down to him by hardier men than most that took Shula into the fold of history occupied by Brown, George Halas, Lombardi, and Tom Landry, sturdy men who took pro football from a ragtag circus show into a respectable profession, and, incidentally, into a shiny but increasingly crass and soulless corporate megalith. He was never a Lombardi, and he knew it. Indeed, like Tom Landry, his defeats at the hands of Lombardi determined the latter's legacy. Almost forgotten now is that in the early and mid-'60s, any one of that holy trinity could have, by winning at the summit, claimed immortality. They all hailed from middle-class, Depression-era slices of America. South Texas, the Italian ghettos of Brooklyn, a Hungarian migrant community in Ohio. All were ruthlessly ambitious. Viewed through the lens of history, Lombardi's hair-trigger emotions and tragically premature death seemed to render his lionization predestined. But Shula had his own mythology, and as it goes with contemporary giants, it was nuanced and subject to the heartache that humanized him. Shula's greatest success wasn't perfection. It was living with failure by cramming so much winning around it. Spending time in Shula's company feels like an honor. In the fall of 1978, a commoner with a pen and notepad on assignment for a sports magazine visited him just before the season and found him untouched by the ravages of high-pressure football. It seemed almost irrelevant that Landry's Dallas Cowboys and Chuck Noll's Pittsburgh Steelers had passed the Dolphins by, or that 3 years before, another short-lived pro football league had ripped the spine from his offense, taking fullback Larry Zonka, halfback Jim Kick, and receiver Paul Warfield from the Dolphins. Or that his all-pro but rapidly declining quarterback, Bob Greasy, was out injured. "You never get used to injuries," he lamented, "but once they happen, you forget about 'em. You just get off your can and figure out where to go from there." He spoke with his flat-voweled Midwestern dialect, rich in saliva, a slight lisp. His meat-hook hands clasped in front of him, his thick brown hair graying. He was stately, ruggedly handsome in the standard coach's banlieue couture, white belt, matching white shoes. His idiom was bromidic coach-speak, his answer to every problem seemingly to roll up your sleeves and get to work. But the takeaway was that he really seemed to believe he could, by the force of his will, impose winning. And by season's end, as if demonstrating the transferable quality that gave the article its title, Shula Pride, he was in the playoffs. Even then, at 48, he had been Coach of the Year 4 times, still a record, and compiled 166 wins, behind only George Halas, Curly Lambeau, and Brown. The only coach to win 100 games in his first decade, he had made 4 Super Bowl appearances and had won 2 World Championships and a pre-merger NFL title. Tempered by some of the most torturous defeats of all time, he admitted, "I've never considered myself to be a coaching giant like a Halas or Lombardi." It hurt to his core to have lost big ones, but he had reason to bask in the limelight of his march toward the record for wins,
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.